from state to state and from toll facility type to type. So the question is, are we back to business as usual here in Florida, or will we be soon? Our traffic will be return, and it'll probably even be growing. But what do we expect to have to build and to improve? So to review this and other aspects of the future of tolls here in Florida, we gave a series of questions for our panelists to discuss. And then after some brief introductions, each panelist will share their thoughts and responses to the questions for a few minutes. And I think we may have a couple brief slides or presentations also as part of that. After each panelist speaks, then we'll take questions from the audience, as Brady was discussing earlier. So first off, let me go through the introductions. Kevin Thibault was named Secretary of Transportation of the Florida Department of Transportation by Governor DeSantis back in January 2019. He's responsible for coordination, planning, and development of a safe, viable transportation system, serving all the regions of the state and all modes of transportation, including multimodal facilities and toll roads. Secretary Thibault spent half his professional career in the private sector, also providing transportation engineering services across the U.S., including in tolls, and for over 16 years in project management, executive leadership at the DOT. And he's been consistently focused on the importance of partnerships to deliver transportation needs of the state. Kevin, the microphone is yours.
All right. So thank you, Phil, and thanks for the introduction. Brady, thank you for the opportunity to talk to your now 292 participants on the call. So a couple of things I wanted to share with you, and it's kind of the state response and what we're doing here and kind of the next steps. On April 29th, many of us remember that Governor DeSantis announced Florida's Phase 1 recovery plan for safe, smart, step-by-step approach to reopening Florida. And as many of us know, that in that first, as part of that executive order, 3 of the counties, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, were not included, although the other 64 were in what we consider Phase 1 reopening. And as many of us now know, Phase 1 has now been extended to Palm Beach County as of yesterday. And so as part of Phase 1 recovery, which began on May 4th, included the following. Schools are to remain in a distance learning environment. Hospitals can resume their elective surgeries. Restaurants can allow outdoor seating with social distancing measures in place, and assuming that they have indoor seating at 25% capacity in compliance with the CDC spacing guidelines. Retailers can open at 25% capacity and also in compliance with those guidelines. No changes yet to bars and gyms. Vulnerable populations should continue to isolate, and individual social distancing practices should continue, and masks should be worn in face-to-face public interactions. And as many of you know, as I mentioned, Palm Beach was included in the Phase 1 recovery expansion just yesterday, and salons and barbershops can also reopen now, as long as they follow the enhanced safety protocols. The governor has been increasing testing across the state and extended several previous executive orders, including his original one, 20-52, extending the state of emergency for the entire state due to COVID-19 for an additional 60 days. So as the state continues to respond to COVID-19 under Governor DeSantis' leadership, FDOT is continuing to provide assistance and a supporting role in a number of areas. A couple of them I want to bring to your attention is, first one is Executive Order 2080 that was issued on March 20th, 2020, and again extended by the recent executive order by the governor. And it involves airport screening and isolation. It includes a requirement that travelers from areas with substantial community spread complete an airport traveler form upon a flight's arrival into Florida and self-isolate for a period of 14 days from entry into Florida or for the duration of the stay wherever is shorter. FDOT is working in partnership with the Department of Health and airports across the state on implementing this executive order. And just to give you an example, to date, over 29,000 traveler forms have been collected as part of that effort. Now, some of you may not have the experience of what those traveler forms entail, but in most cases it's a little bit similar to the form that you would fill out if you're returning back to the United States in Border Protection. Sorry, God, I said it. Customs and Border Protection. I had a little brain cramp there. In that you identify not only the lead person filling out the form, but all the family members as well. So when you have 29,000 forms, does not mean 29,000 people. It's actually a lot more than that. Executive Order 2086, which was issued a week later on March 27th, has additional requirements for certain individuals traveling to Florida and includes the implementation of checkpoints for motorists entering Florida on our roadways, and the requirement for travelers, just like our airport travelers, to fill out a form and self-isolate for a period of 14 days, or for the duration of the stay, whichever is shorter. In this case, FDOT is leading the coordination in partnership with the Department of Health and the Florida Highway Patrol to screen motorists at 2 checkpoints, one at Interstate 95 at the Florida-Georgia line, and the other is at Interstate 10 at the Florida-Alabama line. To date, more than 26,000 traveler forms have been collected on the highways. So again, a significant number of travelers are coming in from areas of significant community spread. Since March 5th, the department has been conducting weekly teleconference calls with passenger seaports and public use airports regarding operations and how we can support them during the pandemic. They occur every Tuesday. Actually, we just finished the one just a few moments ago. It's every Tuesday, 9:30 in the morning for the seaports, 1 p.m. in the afternoon for the airports. Currently, all FDOT facilities still remain closed to the public, and we are continuing to move the department toward teleworking. At this point, we're close to 60% of our employees that are teleworking in a telework agreement. And we do those as appropriate and following all CDC guidelines. As many of you know, toll collection by cash was suspended on March 19th, 2020, in an effort to help keep toll collectors safe and slow the spread of the virus. And as a result, statewide tolls are now being collected via SunPass, toll by plate, or exact tolling lanes if there are those in those locations. Hundreds of FDOT employees have volunteered and are assisting the Department of Economic Opportunity with data entry associated with individuals seeking assistance through the state's Reemployment Assistance Program. This is helping to provide a much-needed support during the pandemic for our fellow Floridians who have lost their job because of COVID-19. And so, just to give you an idea, so as of last week, there were over 230,000 forms that the state employees were completing online, basically, from our fellow Floridians. And I was glad to see that the Department of Transportation was one of the leaders statewide in importing those forms for our fellow Floridians. Finally, I was asked to serve on the Governor's Reopen Task Force Industry Working Group on tourism, construction, real estate, recreation, retail, and transportation. And happy to be working alongside the governor and all members of the working group as we continue discussions related to reopening Florida's economy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about project acceleration, and at the direction of Governor DeSantis, the department began accelerating critical construction projects already under construction throughout Florida in early April. These accelerations are viable due to the reduction in traffic, as Phil mentioned earlier, and as a result, we have the ability to close more travel lanes and operate longer during the day without impeding traffic. There were many opportunities where we took lane closures and extended them for longer periods, took nighttime operations into daytime operations, and those of us in this industry know that in many cases when you're able to do that, you're able to improve production rates and get more work done. So it was a fortunate opportunity to be able to do that. And so this gave us the opportunity to really make a difference, move the needle where we can related to safety, mobility for our residents and visitors when they return to our roadways, as we're already starting to see today. And after we began that discussion with the governor, we were able to identify 15 projects across the state from as far south as Keys, Florida Keys, and as far north as the Panhandle, where we do this possible acceleration. And the total value of those critical infrastructure projects for phase one was over $2.1 billion. I wanted to just highlight 4 projects of significance. First one was the Howard Franklin Bridge in Tampa Bay. I know Joe's very familiar with that facility. The $864 million project was able to accelerate its notice to proceed by 4 weeks, which we should also see the benefit throughout the project. The widening of Southern Boulevard in Western Palm Beach County was accelerated by nearly 3 months by being able to do some of this activity. In Miami-Dade, Javier, the $802 million project that we're working jointly with you, 395 State Road 836, I-95 design-build project, will allow us to do some lane closures and other work that will allow us to accelerate that project by 4 weeks. And finally, here in Orlando, the project at Sand Lake Road near the heavy tourist area of International Drive and Universal Boulevard in Orlando was accelerated by 4 to 6 weeks with some of those activities. So this past Friday, the department also announced another more than 40 projects that we're able to accelerate, which will have an accumulated value of 650 total contract days that we've expedited by doing that. So we're proud to continue with our work efforts in implementing Governor DeSantis' forward-thinking directive to accelerate crucial transportation projects while we take advantage of the lower traffic volumes in our state. As it relates to traffic patterns, we are seeing significantly lower traffic volumes on a number of our roadways. The continued commercial traffic on our roadways have ensured that Floridians across the state have access to essential goods and services and are transporting needing supplies and equipment to our healthcare professionals as well as other essential industries during this time. In fact, last week, FDOT, along with the Florida Trucking Association, recognized and thanked professional truck drivers for their commitment during the pandemic by providing a free lunch at the I-75 rest area near Ocala. The lunches were sponsored by the Florida Trucking Association, Chick-fil-A, Public Supermarkets, and Walmart. It was a great way for us to say thank you. As expected, commuter traffic is much lighter than what we expected pre-COVID, and so we have started to see an uptick in traffic in some of our roadways. We don't expect to see traffic return to our previous volumes immediately, and so as Governor DeSantis begins future phases of reopening our state using a safe, smart, step-by-step approach, we can expect to see additional vehicles on our highway. We also have noticed, as I'm sure many of you have, an increase in the speed of travel throughout the state, and are working with the FHP and other law enforcement partners to mitigate these concerns. For FDOT, it's a little too early to forecast what the impacts of COVID-19 might have on the department or the state budget. As it stands now, the budget for fiscal year 2021 has not been sent to the governor for signature, although it was approved by the legislature in the middle of March. The governor's proposed bolder, brighter, better future budget included $10.3 billion in funding for the DOT, which includes $9.2 billion for the Transportation Work Program. As many of you may have followed, if you follow the transportation sector, know that AASHTO a few weeks ago requested support from the federal government related to expected shortfalls, and so they've requested close to $50 billion in flexible federal spending for states to replace the lost resources not realized, which they estimated to be about 30%. But at the end of the day, partnerships are still critical during this time. We must all work together to continue to flatten the curve further and stop the spread of the coronavirus by following the guidelines provided by the CDC, which includes ensuring social distancing and using PPE for employees as necessary. We're continuing to commit to fulfill our mission regarding the movement of people and goods in the state during this pandemic and will provide our residents and visitors with an enhanced transportation system through the acceleration of projects, big and small, when they return to our roadways. So, a couple of the questions that we have was, it's a little too early to forecast what impacts COVID-19 might have on the department or the budget. One of the things that we are looking at is trying to determine what are those things that relate to cash flow that we need to spread out as relates to our work program and delivery of projects coming up. So you may see that some projects not get deferred, but may get delayed within a fiscal year just to help us with some cash flow until we get a better handle on what those numbers are. I will tell you that at a statewide basis, one of the things that we'll definitely need to get a handle on, and I'm sure all my partners here as well, is looking at what the future holds for us. When can we see some level of rebound? When will that occur? At what level will that occur? How long will this be at a certain level? And so all those things will be part of the forecasting that we need to take into account as we start to develop our budget and look forward to the next delivery of the work program. As it relates to travel patterns, what has been some observations about travel patterns? So obviously we had reduced traffic mode when we were in the safer at home approach this past month, but clearly too, we've implemented, even at a state level, a significant number of staff teleworking. I expect there were a lot of companies and a lot of businesses that were doing the same thing. And I can expect as we step by step reopen the state that you're going to see some of those temporary telework arrangements migrating to a permanent telework arrangement. We're already looking at it here at the department. We actually have a procedure in place that allows for that. And so I have asked my team to continue to look at opportunities for implementing that. But when that happens, you can expect there's probably going to be some travel patterns that may change. Facilities, interchanges, expressways, and so on, that had certain forecasted volumes that may not necessarily materialize as originally forecasted. Certain turning movements, certain intersections that were a problem may not be a problem at this point because of different travel patterns and people's return to work or teleworking. All those things will play a part in how we analyze how we deliver our work program with less resources. And so I've challenged our team to continue to look at what are those key capacity projects that we originally envisioned, and let's revisit many of those to make sure that the original premise of why we developed those projects is still there. So you'll see that we'll have some of that coming in the weeks and days ahead. Clearly in the tourism industry, we're going to see a significant reduction in that travel. I had the opportunity to have some conversations with our partners at the airports and the seaports, and even today, many of them were talking about they were seeing a slight uptick at the airports, but there was still 80+% reduction in what they had seen just a few months ago. So they're going to take a long while before they get back. So think about the transportation connectivity to our airports and our seaports, and how, because that's going to slow ramp up back, those capacity projects that we perhaps had envisioned because of that connectivity, whether it be at Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International, whether it be at the Port of Miami, Javier, all those different things will change the complexity perhaps on the projects that we had envisioned that may require us to revisit some of them. So we're all taking a look at that as we develop our program and our projects. One of the things that that we see as a result of the pandemic is the relocation of white-collar work to homes actually worked well on average. So we may see a return in concentration in some of our urban areas. So one of the things that we're also looking at is what do we need to change related to some of our approaches to our urban environments. As you know, the department has embraced the concept through its design manual on complete streets. And so there are other things that we need to do in some of our urban areas because there may be more people walking or taking bicycles and other transportation modes because of the way they're commuting and they're changing the way they're doing work and delivering their projects. that we need to change and how we approach some of our transportation solutions. So again, some of that is just working in progress as we look at reopening the state. I talked a little bit about acceleration of the projects earlier, so I won't get to that other than we actually, so you heard that we had a phase 2 last week. We're actually on a phase 3 of projects that we're able to accelerate. I want to make sure I differentiate accelerate versus advance. Advance is when I would move a project in from the work program, either earlier year or into the current year. We're at this point not looking at advancing projects. All we're looking at to do is accelerate. So we'll continue to look at those as we continue to try to find opportunities to accelerate construction that we have in our area. And finally, all about technology and looking at technology. You know, not only do we have internet and other things that we are looking to do, but one of the things that we are evaluating as part of the MCORS project initiative actually is how can, because we learned this clearly during this pandemic, is there are still significant parts of the state that do not have reliable broadband or internet connectivity. And as schools were trying to do distance learning and they were finding that was difficult in some of our school districts, what can we do as part of our transportation system to help provide and close that gap? So we're going to continue with those challenges as well as other initiatives that we have underway. Thanks for having me here. Sorry it took a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I hope you have a great meeting.